Alright, welcome back to the channel, Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and today we're taking a look at the MetaWatch, how the Warhammer Age of Sigmar team uses tournament data to balance the game. So we've got a bunch of new data out, and you guys know, obviously, I am a huge fan of data, as it gives us a much better idea based on actual statistics and measurable numbers as to the state of the game and other various important metrics. So that being said, let's jump right in. Welcome to our new Age of Sigmar MetaWatch series, in which the Warhammer Age of Sigmar design team shares insights and analysis on the current state of competitive play. Here on the Warhammer Age of Sigmar team, we're huge fans of match play. Each Monday, various team members will arrive at the studio ready to share their tales of conquest or defeat, from the weekend tournaments they attended, before we all examine the updated data from the events around the world. It is fascinating watching factions rise and fall with the ships of the meta. As players learn how to best wield their favorite faction, discover combos, and build counters to new threats. One of our most important tenets is the mastery through defeat. Players should always feel like they can learn and improve from each of their games, and should come away with new strategies, adjustments to their army roster, or tactical maneuvers that could have turned the tide of the battle in their favor. This is why game balance is so important to us. As in the asymmetric games like this, any imperfection in inherent This is why game balance is so important to us. As in an asymmetric game like this, any perception of inherent advantage to one side can interfere with the ability to learn and grow from the experience. In this article, we touch on the following: how we gather data to inform our design decisions. The core terminology that we'll refer to in the series. Our current balance goals for the game. Snapshot the current faction standings to see where we stand relative to these goals. So let's take a look. If you are new to the channel, make sure to like and subscribe for daily reactions, reviews, and news, painting, modeling, conversion tutorials for Warhammer 40,000, Kill Team, Necromunda, Age of Sigmar, warcry, and some Horus Heresy as well. It's free and it really helps out the channel. The data. Our analytic pipeline currently brings in all data from the official Games Workshop events that are run around the world, as well as the Warhammer Age of Sigmar games recorded in two popular community-run events tools, Best Coast Bearings and tabletop.to. We have more than 35,000 individual games recorded in our database, captured from more than 1,700 events, and more than 4,000 games and 200 events are added every month. We capture results, use of factions and subfactions, and we fully parse any available army rosters. It lets us see how often a particular war scroll or enhancement is used at events, and how often players who use the war scroll or enhancement go on to win their games. It is important to note that the data is imperfect, as we are relying on community-generated data. While certain events track or present data in unusual ways, fortunately, given the low rate of errors relative to the size of the broader datasheet, these generally have a minimal impact on the broader trends. So key terminology. When we're discussing game balance, things tend to boil down into two main categories. External balance measures the relative performance of one faction against others. An army is well balanced externally if it is on a similar power level as the majority of other factions. Internal balance measures the relative performance of options within a faction. We measure this across several axes: war scrolls, enhancements, core battalions, grand strategies, and battle tactics as well. So both important to be externally and internally balanced. There are a number of metrics we monitor for both internal and external balance, but the most common ones are the win rate and inclusion rate. Win rate is one of the key metrics for both internal and external balance. Our win rate calculation is simple: the percentage of games that results in a win. So for instance, in a particular army plays 10 games and won 6, it would have a 60% win rate. We don't include draws in our calculations as a balanced result, e.g. mirror match results in a win rate lower than 50%. Inclusion rate is the percentage of army rosters which include a particular war scroll or enhancement. For instance, if every legion of the First Prince army includes Bellicor, that war scroll has a 100% inclusion rate within that subfaction. Finally, margin of error is a statistic expressing the amount of random sampling error in the results of our datasheet. In simplest terms, the more we split up a particular datasheet, the noisier and less reliable that data will get. We focus on 60-day rolling average, which provides enough data to reduce our margin of error to less than 5% across all factions. This is still a significant margin, it is entirely possible that a handful of skilled generals perform particularly well at an event, nudging the average win rate of a faction up a couple of percentage points. This makes it especially important not to panic or overreact, but rather to be patient, monitor the situation, and consult players and organizers to validate the trends. Our goals. Now that we have introduced the framework, we can discuss our current goals for improving balance on Age of Sigmar. External balance. The average win rate. 1. External balance. The average win rate for each faction should be between 45 and 55%. If every faction has a 50% win rate, a 5% margin of error produces results in this range. We monitor external balance at various levels by battle tome, i.e. orruk warclans, army type, i.e. Kruleboyz, or subfaction, i.e. Grin Blades. 2. Internal balance. We have different internal usage targets set per faction, but in general, we want 60% of war scrolls to be used in more than 5% of competitive lists, along with 50% of faction enhancements. 3. Universal options. Universal war scrolls such as endless spells and universal enhancements such as the arcane tome should be used in less than 10% of army rosters. These are useful tools and help level the playing field, but we want a stronger focus on what makes each faction special and unique. This list comes in a priority order. It's dangerous to try to tune too much at once, which has unintended consequences and can make it difficult to isolate which changes contributed the most to a shift in balance. Our most recent battle scroll focused purely on trying to improve external balance. It made a marked improvement, and 83% of our battle tomes currently sit within the 45 to 55% bracket. As we work on the outliers and external balance improves, we'll be able to move on to improving internal balance and then to universal war scrolls and enhancements. These goals are not final. Once achieved, we set more ambitious targets for ourselves. So current standings. Here's our current snapshot of external balance based on 4,552 games played at 446 events held between the 27th of July and the 25th of September. And that is for 2022. So we have faction win rate and then change. So you can either go up or down or stay the same. And then obviously we have our faction and then our win rate by percentage. So Beasts of Chaos, top faction at 63%. Maggotkin of Nurgle, 58%. Sons of Behemat, 57%. Disciples of Tzeentch, 56%. Bone Splitters, 56%. Daughters of Cain, 55%. Legions of the First Prince, 55%. Seraphon, 54%. Caradron Overlords, 52%. Flesh Eater Courts, 52%. Big Wa, 51%. Sylvanath, 51%. Night Haunt, 51%. Idnath Deepkin, 51%. Cities of Sigmar, 51%. Blades of Corn, 50%. Fire Slayers, 50%. Luminath Realm Lords, 49%. Soulblight Gravelords, 48%. Iron Draws, 48%. Stormcast Eternals, 48%. Skaven, 47%. Ogre Mortrives, 46%. Hedonites of Slaanesh, 45%. Osiarch Bone Reapers, 43%. Slaves to Darkness, 41%. Gloomspite Gitz, 40%. And Kruleboyz, 38%. Data collected between the 27th of July and the 25th of September, 2022. So we see, obviously, we have 5 factions above that 55% mark, and then we have 4 factions below it. So the worst 4 factions are Osiarch Bone Reapers, Slaves to Darkness, Gloomspite Gitz, and Kruleboyz. The best 5 factions are Beasts of Chaos, Maggotkin of Nurgle, Sons of Behemat, Disciples of Tzeentch, and Bone Splitters. So overall, the balance is pretty good with a couple of outliers. Now the clear outlier is obviously Beasts of Chaos, another 5% above the next one. And obviously they recently got that White Dwarf buff. So that took them from literally the worst faction to the best faction. So clearly Games Workshop went way too hard with that buff. It's one thing to be the worst and then be like towards the top, but to go from the absolute worst to the absolute best, clearly something went wrong. So, okay, and obviously here they're going to address it, so I should have just read on. Beasts of Chaos have continued to climb in the rankings thanks to major power boosts from their White Dwarf Battle Tome update. As a faction that had been at the very bottom of the standings of much of this edition, they had a long way to climb. But the strength of the Hearthstone combined with a handful of particularly efficient War Scrolls have pushed them far above our target bracket. So basically, Games Workshop tried to address the problem, they overcompensated substantially, and now Beasts of Chaos are way too good. So clearly they're not going to be able to move everybody up to where Beasts of Chaos are. They need to tone Beasts of Chaos back down to where they are more reasonably. Similarly, certain dominant War Scrolls Puscoil Blightlords and subfactions, Drowned Men, have pushed Maggotkin of Nurgle over the top. Sons of Behemat are a different story. While the Kruleboyz Incarnate has increased in popularity, the biggest factor appears to be a narrow spectrum of results. While they have a lower percentage of podium finishes relative to their win rate, they also have a much lower percentage of events, where they win fewer than 2 of their games played, resulting in a net boost to their overall win rate. So that makes sense. At the bottom end, Kruleboyz and Gloomspite Gitz both continue to struggle and have suffered at the hands of bounty hunters. Both factions should expect significant boosts in the next battle scroll. Yeah, I mean, honestly, for Kruleboyz, it looks really bad if your like brand newest faction is the worst one. Also, it has like a bunch of cool new models that everybody bought, a bunch of models that were available from the starter set and everything, and then they're just absolutely atrocious. You want your starter set armies to at least be decent. Like, I would say right off the bat, Kruleboyz and Stormcast Eternals should be balanced right around that 50% mark, so that anybody that picks up the box set has a legitimate fighting chance to do well, or anybody that picks up that faction, I should say, from a starter set. Where next for MetaWatch? We'll use these articles to zoom in on the competitive meta of Age of Sigmar, touching up on internal balance, external balance between subfactions, and universal enhancements and core battalions. We're planning on supplementing this series with a new MetaWatch podcast, which will allow us to delve deeper into these topics. We're already planning an episode to your questions, so please email any queries you'd like answered to aosfaq@gwplc.com. Topics can include specific data you're curious about, which faction is most likely to field a Kruleboyz Incarnate, or questions about our process. How do we handle team or doubles events? Game balance is a process, and we are constantly working to improve our tools and methodologies. We feel like we're going to the right direction, but recognize we still have a ways to go. The Warhammer Age of Sigmar team would like to extend a huge thanks to everyone who has contributed to running or playing in events or has submitted feedback. We're excited to hear what you think of the new battle scroll coming soon, and even more excited to measure the impact that it has. All right, so overall, pretty good article there. I definitely like to hear the data, see the data, and then see them respond based on the data. I am a very, very data-driven person, so I really like what we see here. So clearly, Beasts of Chaos need to be toned back down a little bit. I would say probably, 1% off of their goal is not a big deal. So probably Bone Splitters and Disciples of Tzeentch are okay. That could easily come or go. I would say the Sons of Behemat and the Maggotkin of Nurgle are a little strong, but again, not crazy. And like they said, it's not like Sons of Behemat are winning a bunch of events, but they're also like doing more consistently good in the beginning. So a lot of times a list like Sons of Behemat will be like a gatekeeper list. So you have to be able to beat that list if you want to do well at a tournament. But very rarely will you see a gatekeeper list actually win a tournament. And it sounds like that's about where Sons of Behemat are at. So interesting. We clearly need to see Beasts of Nurgle tone back down. And then here on the bottom end, if we want to be at least at 45, Kruleboyz need a massive boost. Gloomspite Gitz and Slaves to Darkness all need a pretty big boost. We know the Slaves to Darkness book is coming soon. We know the Ogre and Maw Tribes book is coming soon. So those are down at the bottom. That's definitely a good sign. That should help them out. But clearly, again, they had mentioned, obviously, the bounty hunters affecting Kruleboyz. Clearly, they need to find a way to roll back some of that, because what was already like not that great of a faction is now substantially worse than everyone else. So I think if they can bring up Kruleboyz and Gloomspite Gitz, Slaves to Darkness as well, and they can tone down Beasts of Chaos and Maggotkin of Nurgle, I think overall this will be in a pretty nice place. So very good to see the majority of the factions falling in that like middle cluster right there. A couple of them are surprising as well. So very interesting. Let me know what you think down below. How do you feel like this represents the overall scene? Does this represent your local scene? Does this seem crazy? Like, are Beasts of Chaos actually just like completely terrible where you're at? And like Kruleboyz are just smashing everyone? I'm always curious to hear like actual stories from people in real life. I do like to see statistics like this, especially on a grand scale, but I always like to hear back from specific people that are in the trenches, taking nades, giving me their honest opinions as well. And as always, if you enjoyed today's content, reactions, reviews, and news, painting, modeling, conversion tutorials for Warhammer 40,000, Kill Team Necromunda, Age of Sigmar, Warcry, and Horus Heresy as well, make sure to like and subscribe. Really helps out the channel. And I love to hear from you guys, so leave a comment down below. That's it for today. Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and I'm out of here.